So we are waiting for the most expected and beloved speaker, Mr. Nagendra Nath Sinha. I have a privilege of listening to him in one of the forum in Kolkata, and it's an honor for me to listen to him again. Welcome you, sir, and we would love to listen to your thoughts.
Good afternoon to the esteemed panel on the dais, esteemed dignitaries of the dais, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank ICC for inviting me to as the chief guest for their Make in India and Steel Outlook session. We have had the privilege of listening to very many eminent speakers who have delved into different aspects of the steel making, mining, technology, and I think all of them have made very valuable points. And after such an illustrious list of panelists and speakers, it's very difficult to add much to what they have said. Nevertheless, let me make some effort. One point which was made by almost every speaker is that iron and steel contribute about 2% of the Indian GDP. And this number, though by itself may be minuscule, but is the basis and the foundation for all the manufacturing and other activities that takes place in the economy. And the heartening thing is that it's growing. And growing, in fact, the elasticity of growth is more than the growth of the economy by itself, which is what it should happen. The Indian economy last year grew by 6.2%, and however, the consumption of the steel grew almost by 11.9%. Similarly, 13.3%, I'm sorry, it grew from 105.8 to 119.9 million tons. We were seeing, trying to see what was the demand like in the first 2 months of this financial year as compared to last financial year. And we saw that it has grown from 18.8 million ton to about 23.3 million ton, which is about 7.9 percentage point of growth. These are corroborated by the numbers that comes out from the World Steel Association. There may be some point of the methodology. However, the growth that they have mentioned is about 5.7% in this calendar year as compared to the similar period last calendar year. In terms of, if we go by JPC statistics, the growth in the finished steel consumption in this calendar year is about 10.9%. That is taking from January to May. The import intensity and import volumes both are coming down. Though there are concerns from time to time, and rightly so, that there are instances of dumping from certain countries. However, if you see the quantity is as to the overall extent of consumption gradually as a proportion coming down. However, what is not coming down is the degree of specialty nature of the steel. So, for a address for the PLI function, I was looking at the numbers, and we found that this number had grown from somewhere sub 60 to about over 60, something like 65, 66% or so. So the PLI rightly tries to address that, and I'm quite happy to see the confidence in Indian manufacturers who now profess the confidence of producing almost any kind of steel and not and metals, and also exporting it to the different parts of the country. It is right. Until unless you have the necessary confidence, technology, marketing muscle, and marketing savvy to market your product in other countries, in the food chain of the steel making, India cannot gain her rightful place, and therefore it is important and necessary that our industries, our manufacturers also have the necessary confidence and technology and wherewithal, etc., to make specialty steel and to be able to almost meet their entire needs. No country, we know that in this time and age, can make all kinds of steel. But to the extent that we are able to make, and this point I have also made earlier, we develop our manufacturing ecosystem. If we only import a particular grade, so all those who are associated with development of technology, manufacturers, supply of spares, technologists, etc., those issues won't come about, and therefore it will only remain incomplete, a flawed kind of a manufacturing capacity, and therefore it is necessary that we also improve our capacity of the steel making in various specialized grades as well, and I'm very happy that industry and government together are making this transition. Abhyuday mentioned to me that just the last week there was this trade fair in Germany called MedTech, and India had a very substantial representation in that trade fair, and that showed the willingness of the Indian manufacturers to get access to the latest technology that is available within the global fraternity. And it is not to undermine the Indian efforts at technology development that is taking place, a point which Santosh Chaurasia made, that we also have large areas of strength, and I think but we should not feel shy of integrating what we have, what we get from abroad, and what we develop in India. What should happen is that over a period of time, the mix of Indian technologies, Indian manufacturers developing their own technology, adapting to that, and being able to supply the technology to Indian steel makers should increase, should improve. We currently have a capacity of about 161 million ton within the country. There may be some issues with regard to counting of the capacity, and we can discuss it offline. There are some undercounting happening somewhere. We need to address that. But the fact remains that it is at sub 200, and it needs to go up as the demand itself is galloping. So therefore, the Indian steel makers need to be able to meet the demand, and for this we need to, as per the projection and as per the reality as well, add about 140 million tons additional capacity, and should not be difficult given the announcements that have been made from time to time in public domain and in private conversations. So we are quite hopeful that the Indian steel makers will add this capacity, and that would certainly require a substantial sum of money. If you take a figure of about $1 billion, about 8,000 crore rupees per million metric ton of addition development of new capacity, so that 140 million ton, it's about 12 lakh crores or so. So it's a substantial sum, but it's not an insurmountable sum, given the fact that the Indian banking system now has said its hangover resulting from the NPAs. Now it's surplus with liquidity, and you have the 100% FDI available in the steel sector, and there are policies, many of which have been mentioned, and I need not. So, okay. So, I was mentioning that the availability of funds for financing the expansion should not prove difficult, given the status of the banking sector as well as the policies around it. There are at times questions asked as to whether we have the necessary visibility of demand. But I think what has happened in at least in last 3 years is that the expansion and the funds for the development of infrastructure has been growing at a rate of about 18% CAGR. And in my own memory, I think in 21-22 it was somewhere in the range of 4.5 lakh crores. In 22-23 it became 7.5 lakh crores, and this year capex by the central ministries itself is about 10 lakh crores, and if you see the overall number, which includes transfers as well as PSU capex, etc., so those numbers are something like 13.7 lakh crores, which is about 4.5% of the capex which is publicly funded, and if you add to that the capex that is also being financed by the private sector, so that certainly adds to a very tidy number. So I won't delve into with detail in this regard. Just wanted to illustrate the fact that the government is pushing the infrastructure development. A related point which I wanted to mention is I was looking at the 3 years numbers again with regard to the type of usage of steel in last 3 years, and what I found striking is that the proportion on each segment is constant over last 3 years. It's not, the ratio is not changing. For example, if you take building and construction, it's about 42%. If you take the infrastructure, it's about 25 to 26%. If you take manufacture and packaging, so it's about 22%. The one on defense is about 1%, auto is about 9% or so, and this number is remaining constant over last 3 years. So that is to say that other parts of the economy are also growing almost in a similar manner, and the demand seems to be pulling in a similar trajectory in all the areas. There was this point made by Mr. Rao, and in great detail, about the issue of handling of logistics, and he very rightly mentioned that if we want to handle about 500 million ton of iron and steel manufacture, then that would mean carriage of about 2 billion tons of products and inputs, which is a very large number as compared to what their current capacity is. So it is not that the railway is not adding capacity. As per the numbers that we get from the railway ministry, last year itself they added about 5,000 kilometers of new railway lines. Under the Gati Shakti plan, they have taken up they are taking up many projects, and we have also provided to them a list of about 22 projects. And when the finance ministry wanted to scrutinize their budget proposal, they also sought from us a list of projects that could help the steel industry to move their goods and get their goods. So we provided, after consultation with the steel makers, another list of about 20 odd projects. On top of that, they are also adding about 2,000 to 2,500 wagons per month. So they are also increasing their capacity, but the fact remains that we have to also think out of the box to acquire the necessary logistics capacity, because if we depend on just the tried and tested, it may not work out, and we have to free up capacity in the country's own logistics network. I'm very happy to add to what Mr. Rao mentioned of working with the Railway Ministry, with the Gati Shakti plan, of supporting the development of a slurry pipeline network. So Railway Ministry had initially accepted, as he mentioned, but since they have been furiously adding to their capacity, so there has been some rethink, because now there is a thinking that this capacity slurry pipeline, if it comes about, it will displace their existing carriage capacity, and to that extent it will remain idle. But I think it's a very short-termist thinking. In the long run, in the medium run, each transporter has so much to carry that they would have their plates full if they do justice to that. So we will be, we are working with the Railway Ministry. We have taken one project as a proof of demonstration with the Railway Ministry, in which the entire ROW lies in the along the railway line, and we will try to see if we are able to meet all the issues that the Railway Ministry have in this regard, and if we need to modify anything in order to achieve and receive the acceptance of the Railway Ministry. Yes, that the suggestion made by him in form of the National Slurry Pipeline Grid is a valuable document, and unfortunately we didn't have access to that document, and now that he has mentioned such a document exists with Macon as well as in the Steel Ministry, we'll dust that out and we'll look at that. To us, what excites us is the fact that if we could think slurry pipeline as a public utility, if that happens, that would be a great development, because what we have seen with whatever rule of thumb calculations that we have made is that once you increase the capacity of the slurry pipeline, the capex unit cost per unit of movement in terms of capex as well as opex falls and becomes economic for everyone to carry at even a lower cost, both in terms of the actual expenditure incurred as well as the carbon emissions saved, etc., and the environmental costs. So it's a great thought, but there are multiple challenges in terms of its acceptance and its realization. So we'll have a task cut out in order to formulate, conceptualize, sell, and then win acceptance of everyone. But the logistics wing of the DPIIT seems quite keen, and so we think we will be able to move ahead. The next, I take the issue of the technology, particularly arising out of the issue of the decarbonization. And the decarbonization agenda is proceeding very fast. And on top of that, there are developments across the world where, because of considerations which are now being attached to the trade, the Indian manufacturers will have to up their game in order to be more productive, less carbon emitting, and improve their efficiency of production quickly. Many levers have been mentioned, including the adoption of digital technologies, Industry 4.0, material efficiency, energy efficiency, RE, the hydrogen CCUS of decarbonization. So quite a difficult task ahead of all of us, for the academia, for the research and development institution, as well as for the industry also. Because sometimes we feel that there is ultimately the government which will come and save certain industries. But now the economic reality is now changed very substantially. I think what you can expect is that there would be help, there would be support, there would be supportive policies, but it will not be possible for the industry and possible for the government to extend hand which provides financial support or things of that kind, so that industry which would otherwise not survive will be helped to survive. So there would be a partnership, and this partnership would try to help all the steel players and would try to ensure that the small and medium steel makers also survive, and they also adopt the latest techniques in their domain, and they modify their working practices. They are alive to the demands of the improvement in technology. And as Mr. Rao mentioned, that those who fail to read the line in which the technology is developing, they may not survive, and therefore it is important for associations like ICC also to work with the steel makers of small and medium variety, so that they are also able to get advantage of the new technological developments. I would address two more issues and thereafter I stop. One issue which was mentioned by Abhyuday while we were talking before coming to this session was the issue of the manpower. And there is a shortage of manpower in this sector, particularly when many industries want to expand and many industries want to adopt the new technologies. Unfortunately, the way our industry has progressed so far is that there were not many jobs available for the people who studied mining and metallurgy, and therefore there has been a tendency for most of the students to move away from the mining and metallurgy, and they are hardly interested. So we'll have to work with the academia and also improve our attractiveness through attractive HR policies, salaries, and other issues, and reach out to the academic institutions not only at the time of when they graduate and are looking for job, but also earlier, so that the tendency for migration from these branches to areas which are evergreen like IT, etc., that stops. So and that is at least not as much of a retarding factor in availability of manpower. But and this issue is also important for development of the manpower at operating levels as well. So the ministry is working towards this area by reactivating the Biju Patnaik National Steel Institute, and through which the particularly the small and medium steel makers and to those of large steel makers who want to utilize those facilities to train their operating manpower, those could be provided those support in addition to what we can get from the NISST. Another area which was mentioned to me by Tata Steel Research and Development Center, that there is a shortage of process metallurgists within the country and who are capable of undertaking research in this regard. So there are very few. Even if you want to hire and set up your own research and development institution, there are very few PhD students, MTech students in those areas, and there are very few researchers and professors to guide them. So this is one area which we'll have to meet. We are trying to work on this issue along with the Ministry of Mines, because at the level of mining departments within those academic institutions, there is hardly any difference between the ferrous and non-ferrous metallurgy, and so we plan to work together. Another area which I want to mention is the issue of the suppliers of machineries and supplies for the steel making, and I'm sure this would also be valid for the aluminum sector as well. For example, the rollers which is used in the cold rolling mills, etc., is what we are not able to get within the country. There are few, one or two manufacturers. There were few earlier, but they withered away, and most of it is supplied from China and other countries. Similarly, refractories, quite a lot of it is imported. And similarly, there are a list of about 5,000 odd products which are needed for the steel manufacturer, and I'm sure a similar list could be compiled for the non-ferrous metallurgy as well. I think associations like ICC also need to address this issue of development of capacities for manufacture of these complex of these kind of equipments and supplies, so that to the extent feasible, India has the necessary capacities in the manufacture of these items, and we are able to be as much dependent on ourselves and compete at an equal footing in the international market. And why should we not? Because we are the second largest steel makers, and to think that a company in Austria would be supplying when their own production capacity is 4 million ton as compared to your country like India, which has 40 times more capacity. I'm just giving an example. So we also need to develop this capacity. In the end, I would like to mention that the outlook of the metal sector and particularly the steel sector is very bright. You play a very vital role for the India's development, and in your strength lies the strength of the country, and there is a need for forging greater partnership and cooperation between both industry, the government, the financial institution, the technical institutions, so that as a whole we are able to traverse this journey with as little pain as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Sinha highlighted many points, starting from data of finished steel products, import intensity, especially steel concern, and then